evil. And we know that Satan himself, he's called the red dragon, and we know that he is in place of God the Father. And then we're going to be looking for the beast that comes up out of the sea, who is the Antichrist, and we will then be looking at the false prophet, who is the beast that comes up out of the land. So I wanted to do all of this in one lesson. And about Saturday afternoon, I thought, this cannot be done in one lesson and do it justice. So we are going to actually cover Revelation 13, verse 1 and 2 today. And I know y'all aren't surprised. So, first of all, we are going to lay a lot of groundwork because a lot of us have learned about things about the Antichrist and the false prophet, but have we ever taken the whole picture the Bible gives us back in prophecy and then start putting all the puzzle pieces together so we get a good picture of exactly the character and the attributes of the Antichrist? Prophetic scripture, about how much of the Bible is prophecy? About 1/3. And so if you take out 1/3 of this Bible, you're going to be in trouble. We study the whole counsel of God, do we not? So we're looking at prophetic scripture, and it reveals that there's actually a coming of 3 other individuals besides the coming of Jesus Christ. And so we find out, especially as we get into the tribulation period, we're going to have Satan. He's going to be coming to earth. Remember, he's going to get kicked out of heaven and come to earth. And then we're going to see the coming of his Antichrist and the coming of the false prophet. Now, do we have people that have been a type of the Antichrist? Yes, we do. But has the real Antichrist shown up yet? No, we don't know who he is. We see people that have attributes and characteristics of the Antichrist, but we do not know who he is yet. So we're going to be studying Satan's unholy trinity, and a lot of this is in end times prophecy that we'll find in the book of Daniel and that we will find in the book of Revelation. Satan is actually going to be ruling this world for 3.5 years. He will be the ruler, and God will allow it and permit it. And he will have his 2 key henchmen, which are the Antichrist and which are the false prophet. Now, we all know this. Satan's one of his best strategies and one of his best tactics is to do what? Counterfeit. He tries to imitate. So he will imitate and counterfeit all the things of God so that it appears that he is like God. Or that coming up, that his Antichrist is the Messiah or his false prophet. He's trying to put things in our path that he is counterfeiting the real things of God. Now remember, the word anti can mean against, and these people are against God. But much of the time we're talking about them, it means in place of or instead of. So we have the Antichrist that's coming, and I'm presenting you somebody in place of the real Jesus Christ. Or we have the false prophet coming, and we're presenting someone that is in place of God the Holy Spirit. So they are against them, but it's more literally that they are in place of them instead of them. The Holy Trinity is made up, we all know this, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And so Satan also is going to have a counterfeit Trinity, the same ones. He's going to have a Father, a Son, and a Spirit also in his Trinity. If we look at Satan's unholy Trinity, he is in place of God the Father, correct? And his mantra is, I will be like the Most High. That's his theme. And then his God, in place of God the Son, he has the Antichrist or the beast that's going to come up out of the sea. And he is in place of the Messiah. And he is also called the Son of Perdition. And this is who everybody is going to wind up worshiping during the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period. And then we have the false prophet, who's the 3rd member of the unholy Trinity, and he's in place of who? He's in place of the Holy Spirit. And what is one of the ministries of our Holy Spirit? Does he glorify Jesus Christ and point others to Jesus Christ? That's what the false prophet will do, because he's the false Holy Spirit, and he will point people to the Antichrist, and he's going to cause people to take the mark and cause people to worship the beast or the Antichrist. Now, let's think about God's Holy Trinity. Is it infinite truth, love, and goodness? But we have this counter Trinity over here of unholiness, and it's filled with deception, it's filled with hatred, and it's filled with unadulterated evil. So do you see the opposite? It's exactly the opposite, but yet it's going to be presented as a Holy Trinity, and it will have many, many followers. So during the second half of the tribulation period, this unholy Trinity is going to unite in a desperate attempt. They have a final attempt to overthrow God, and it will be the worst period on earth during the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period, which is how long? 7 years. And so we've got the first 3.5, we have a midpoint, and then we have the last 3.5. And this is when the unholy Trinity will be unleashed on the world. And they will be allowed to be in control and in power for 3.5 years. It will be a terrible time. Now, in chapter 12 of Revelation, where we spent some time last week, we met God the Father, the imitator, because we met Satan, and he's called the red dragon. Right. He's called the devil, he's called Satan, he's called the old serpent. And so this is character number 1. We're not going to spend much time on him, because most of us know about his fall. We know what a beautiful creature he was when he was created, and we know that he wanted to be like the Most High, his pride, and then he fell, right? And took a third of the angels with him. But this great red dragon is instead of God the Father. He is in place of, and he says, I'm going to be like the Most High. And we found out in Revelation 12 last week, what is the one thing he wants to do? Hello? Persecute. He wants to persecute God's people. Is he the one that's been trying to kill the messianic line forever? Is he trying to prevent the coming of Jesus Christ? Yes. So he's always out to persecute God's people. Now, in chapter 12, verse 3, we had this last week. He's called a great red dragon. He has how many heads? 7. How many horns? 10. How many crowns? And the crowns are up on the heads. We'll see it a little bit different on the Antichrist. Now, I believe red indicates he has a vicious personality. And he also is homicidal. He will be responsible for the bloodshed of scores, an unnumbered amount of people, all during history, and especially during the tribulation period. So there's a description of him. Now, you want to close that? Thanks. During the tribulation period, we see that he is identified as having 7 heads. Now, this is a review, if y'all have been with me the last couple of months. These heads, every little head represents a what? A kingdom. And sometimes it can represent the king and the kingdom, because it's hard to separate the king from his kingdom. So we have 7 evil kingdoms, and Satan has empowered them throughout history. He's used them all through history to prevent God's ultimate plan from coming to fruition. Has he been persecuting God's people for thousands of years? Yes. What was the first head? Anybody remember? Egypt, Pharaoh. So we have had 7 evil kingdoms, or these heads, and that's who they are on the head of the red dragon. So 5 of the kingdoms, do you remember the scripture when he's talking to John and also to Daniel? He said 5 of them have come, right? And so when he's talking to John, it's about 95 AD. And he's telling John who these heads are. He says 5 have come. Well, who was before John wrote? Egypt and Syria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. He says 5 have come, 1 is. So who is the kingdom while John's writing? Who is in charge? Rome. So that's the kingdom that is. And then all of these kingdoms had they severely oppressed, persecuted, and killed many Jews. Yes? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we see that Satan has been behind all of these kingdoms. Can you see that? He has influenced and he has put it in the hearts of people, of these kings, to persecute the Christians and to persecute God's people, starting with Egypt. Now, the dragon, we saw this last week in chapter 12. The dragon is standing before this woman who's pregnant and about to give birth. The woman is the nation of Israel, because the messianic line comes through her, correct? The nation of Israel. And she's clothed with white. She has the sun. She's got the moon, the 12 stars, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. So the dragon's standing there, and what's his purpose? She's about to deliver, and what does he want to do to her male child? Kill it. He wants to kill that child. And so that was Satan's intent. Now, during the days of John, when he's writing the book of Revelation, Rome is in charge. Rome was probably the most oppressive. They were known to be very cruel. And under Roman rule, what did King Herod do? He put out a deal to murder every little boy 2 and under. That is pretty bad. That is horrific. Because why? Trying to kill baby Jesus. Now, Pontius Pilate, he was also Roman, and he ultimately authorized the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, right? So all of that happened under the empire of Rome. Now, head number 7, remember the scripture? 5 have passed, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. That'd be number 7. So number 7 is going to be headed, and we're getting down there. Can y'all picture Nebuchadnezzar's statue? We've come through all of it, and we're getting down to those 10 toes, right? So the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period are going to be a 10-nation confederacy. That's your 10 toes, your 10 horns. And the Antichrist comes on the scene, and he comes as what? A peacemaker. That's how he enters this time. This is the first half, and he's actually going to sign a covenant that's good for how long? 7 years. So are y'all beginning to understand and get more of this in your mind? Every time I go over it, I understand it a little more. Now, if you remember, there's a scripture that was so confusing. It said that number 7 came along, and he was, and then he is no more, and then he's number 8, but he's of the 7. That's confusing, right? Okay, number 8 is actually going to be the kingdom that comes the last half of the tribulation period. The first half is the 10 kings, right? We have this 10-nation confederacy. And then do you remember at the midpoint, remember Daniel, what did he say was coming up among those 10 horns? That little horn. And the little horn's the Antichrist. And he's going to become the dictator, and he's actually number 8. And so he's of the 7, but he's number 8. And so this is the midpoint of the tribulation period, and the Antichrist is going to be energized from Satan. Now, why is he going to indwell the Antichrist, Satan? What's happened to him? He got kicked out of heaven. He was thrown to earth, and he's mad, right? And so we have an Antichrist that's going to be allowed to rule for the last 3.5 years. He's going to be indwelt by Satan and energized by Satan, and really all hell is going to break out on earth. Now, in chapter 17, when we studied the woman that was riding the beast, we talked about all of these kingdoms. And I don't think I have this on your notes. Egypt was number 1, Assyria is number 2, Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon was number 3. Can y'all picture these on the image? Number 4 was the bear raised up on one side, remember, and that's Cyrus the Great. And then Alexander the Great, and then Rome, that's the one that is. And then number 7, you're going to have the reunited Roman Empire, the 10 kings. And the Antichrist has come as a peacemaker, right? Things are going okay, except we've got all these seals and trumpets going on, right? Okay, then we get to the midpoint. Satan's kicked out of heaven. He's mad, and he is going to indwell the Antichrist, who will rise up and become the dictator of the last 3.5 years, right? Now, could y'all take a test and pass? Oh, come on. I'm trying to make this very clear, very simple. Okay, here's number 8, the last 3.5 years. And think I have a man on earth that is a dictator, and he's indwelt by Satan. Now, can you imagine living in that time? 3.5 years. This will be the most oppressive and the fiercest time, much more so than the other 7. It's going to be the worst time. In fact, they call it the time of Jacob's trouble. It will be the world kingdom. See, we've had 10 guys, right? Now we're going to have a dictator, and he will have the whole world, and he will be energized by Satan. So everybody's followed me so far, right? Good. Now, this kingdom is going to be rooted in all the previous empires. I'll show you that in a minute. It is going to have characteristics of all those others. And they will unite in one. So all the evil and all the power we saw in all these before, they are now in this one. And it added to the ferocity of these beasts will be Satan's own power, Satan's throne, and Satan's authority. Is God going to allow him to do this for 3.5 years? Yes. Now, if you compare the statue of Daniel and you compare in chapter 7 of Daniel, what happened? Daniel has the same vision essentially, but where Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about gold and bronze and all these things, Daniel dreamed about what? Beast. He had these beasts. And so the head of gold was the lion. That was Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. You had the chest and arms of silver. That's the bear raised up on on one side, and he's got 3 ribs in his mouth because he's totally devoured 3 nations. And then you have the bellies and thighs of bronze. That's the leopard with 4 heads that had wings like a bird. Why did it have 4 heads? Because when Alexander the Great, he had the largest empire thus far. And when he died, it was so large, they divided his kingdom into 4 different areas and gave an area to each of his 4 generals. That's why that animal has 4 heads. Now, then we had the legs of iron. That was Rome. And then you get down to the feet of iron and clay. That's the 10 horns of the beast. And then the little horn, I put a number 8 there. I don't know if I put it on yours or not. I did. Good. Okay, so he's really number 8. When the little horn comes to power, we don't know who he is. But when his 3.5 years is up, what's going to open up and come to earth? Jesus Christ, that stone that the builders rejected, a stone not made with hands, and he's going to come and crush all the kingdoms and set up his own. Do you see how we need to have Daniel and Revelation together to understand the whole scope? Yes. Now, last week we introduced this and we talked about a parenthetical passage. And this parenthetical passage, remember, we'll find action going and action going. And then it's like we take a little breather, right? And then there'll be a chapter to kind of describe for us what just happened. So chapter 12 that we did last week is a parenthetical. It's like an intermission, and it is going to reveal 7 of the main things that we need to know about in the book of Revelation. It told us in verse 1 and 2 about the sun-clothed woman who is Israel. In verse 3, it told us about the red dragon who is Satan. And his purpose in 5 and 6 He wants to devour that man-child. And then we went to verse 7, and we have the archangel Michael, and he is going to have a war with Satan. Can Satan still access God's throne today? Yeah, he accuses us a lot. Okay, but there's going to be a war at the 3.5-year point. And what's going to happen to Satan? He and all of his demons are going to be cast to earth. And then there's a scripture that says, woe to you that are on the earth, because Satan's mad and he's been cast down. And now Satan and his demons are going to be on the earth. Wow. Then in verses 13 to 17, we found out about the Jewish remnant. He goes after them. God provides for them, and he saves a remnant, right? Okay. And so then Satan's mad as a hornet. However mad that is. He's that and more. And he is now going to go after the remnant of her seed, her children. Then we're coming to chapter 13, another parenthetical passage, and we're going to be introduced to the Antichrist, who's going to be the beast out of the sea, and we're going to be introduced to the false prophet, who's the beast out of the earth. Chapter 12 and 13 are crucial for you to understand who all these people are and these things, so you understand the book of Revelation. But we're going back to the book of Daniel, because you cannot understand Revelation without Daniel. So here's our Satanic Trinity, and we're going on now to the focus of today, which is the Antichrist. He will be the beast out of the sea, and he is in place of Jesus. He is in place of the Messiah. Okay? Y'all have really got to pay attention and keep your brain in gear. Now, Revelation 13, 1 to 10. This is a quote from some commentator. He says, it is the most graphic, the most thorough, the most penetrating, the most unforgettable, the most dramatic presentation of the Antichrist anywhere in Scripture. But he said it's not the first. We've had other descriptions. Now, in 1 John 2:18, and I remind you that John in his epistle of 1 John, this is the only place the word Antichrist is used in the Bible. He's the one that coined the term. But what did he say in chapter 2, verse 18? You have heard that Antichrist is coming. Now, he wrote that before he wrote the book of Revelation, right? Before Revelation was written, they knew, hey, Antichrist is coming. Well, where did they find this out? Well, it was very common teaching, because even before John, who had written about it? Paul. And Paul said, do you not remember, he's in Thessalonica, and he's in the second time he wrote to him. The first time he went to him, remember, he taught him 3 Sabbaths. And then he left. And then they got all confused. So he writing him another letter, and he said, I wrote you about this before. And in the second letter, he's trying to straighten them out. He said, do you not remember that while I was with you, I was telling you these things? And he talked about the lawless one that would be coming. I plan to give you a sheet next week that there's like 30-something titles of the Antichrist that are in the Bible. So every time you see that term, you will know it's talking about the Antichrist. So where did John and Paul get all this information? Where did they learn about the Antichrist? From Daniel. So they went back to Daniel. Did they have the scroll of Daniel? Sure they did. So we're going to go back and look at Daniel and look at some of the prophecies about the Antichrist. I want y'all to have a really full picture of the Antichrist. So we're in Daniel 7, verse 8. He says, I was considering those horns. Now in the upper right corner, you see the beast. That's Daniel's 4th beast. Remember, it said it has iron teeth. It has claws of brass or iron maybe. And anyway, he was just a vicious-looking thing. The other had looked like a lion, a bear, and a leopard, and it looked like it. This doesn't look like an animal. This is a real beast. So he said, I was looking at those 10 horns, and what happened? There's another little horn that what? Starts coming up among them. That's verse 8. And he says, before whom 3 of the first horns had been plucked out by the roots. Now, we're talking about the Antichrist. So when he rises up in power, he is going to subdue 3 of the 10, right? And then what do the other 7 say? They give their power to him. So all of the power of the whole world is going to be given to the Antichrist. Now he goes on to say, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man. And he spoke very pompous words. And he says, I was watching, and this little horn, and who is he? I'm going to keep asking you. It's the Antichrist. This little horn, he's making war against all the saints, and he's prevailing against them, and he's overcoming them. And you want to know, how long is he going to be able to do that? He answers the question, until the Ancient of Days comes. That's the second coming. And judgment will be given to the saints of the Most High, and the time will come that the saints get to possess the kingdom. Woo, yes, isn't that awesome? But he's going to be able to overcome them and prevail and fight against them how long? 3.5 years. Now, the Antichrist, we find out he is an intellectual genius. He's a powerful orator who grows out of the confederacy of the 10, right? The 10 toes of the 10 horns. He comes out of it. And he's going to take over and have complete authority. He's going to wage war with the saints. This is during the tribulation. He wages war with them, and he'll overcome them until God steps in. And we have the second coming, and then the saints are going to get to go in and set up the kingdom of Jesus Christ. I can hardly wait for that day. That is going to be awesome. Now, in verse 23, as for this fourth beast, and the fourth beast is the Roman Empire, right? And he says he's got 10 horns, he's dreadful, he's terrifying, he's got iron teeth, and he is going to devour and break everything in his sight and trample it down. There's your Antichrist when that little horn rises. He is going to speak great words against the Most High. So is he going to be blasphemous? Yes. And he's going to wear out the saints. That's mentioned several times. He's going to be wearing out. Can you think about the people that are going to be living in this time that have come to faith in Jesus Christ? You and I have no clue what they're going to go through and how they are going to have to remain steadfast. He's wearing out the saints of the Most High. So we find out through injustice, through seizure and punishment and death, this Antichrist, the little horn, will massacre all those people that belong to God. Remember, he wants to change the laws, is one thing. And he wants to write his own morality. And it says in Daniel 7:25, we're talking about the saints, they will be given into his hand till a time, 1 year, times 2 years, that's 3, and a half a time is a half a year. 3.5 years, you'll find in the Bible 42 months, or you'll find 1,260 days. They're all the same. Just different people use a different terminology. So we can look at some further prophecy now in Daniel, and it will tell us about this coming world ruler. He is going to wreak havoc among the saints and the world till Jesus Christ comes back. Don't you know those saints are going to be so glad when they see the sky unroll like a scroll, and here comes Jesus. In Daniel 8:23, it says, in the latter time of the kingdom, all right, when the transgressors are come to the full, there's going to be a king of fierce countenance. Who's that? It's the Antichrist. Daniel talks about him a lot. And he will understand dark sentences. He will stand up. So he's an intimidator. He's skilled in intrigue, and he is a master deceiver. Now, we look in Daniel 8:24 and 25, and we think, how is this one person going to rise up to be dictator of the world? Doesn't that seem like it has to be something almost supernatural? For one person to become the dictator of the entire world and everybody else just bow to him. It says, he will come in power and his power will be mighty, but it's not by his own power. So if you look in Revelation 13:2, where does his power come from? The red dragon. Not only does the red dragon give him power, he gives him his seat or his throne, and he will give him his authority. In fact, the dragon is going to indwell this man. So, we see how will he come in, and it goes on in Daniel 8, it says he will destroy to an extraordinary degree everything in his path. Remember the iron beast of Rome? It said it trampled and it destroyed everything under its feet, and that's what he will do. It says he will prosper in practice, and here's the word destroy again. He's going to be able to destroy the mighty and holy people of God. This is a vicious person who we can see is inspired and driven by Satan. So it says, how is he going to come in? Jesus spoke this on his Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. Remember, Matthew 24 is talking about the tribulation period. Okay. He says, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And we're thinking, what is then? It's the abomination of desolation. Shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. What starts that last 3.5 years? The abomination of desolation. What is that? Everybody know? That's where the Antichrist, he stands up in the Jewish temple. He quits all of their sacrifices. Remember, he came in as a peacemaker. He said, you can have your religion, you can build your temple. And now what's he saying? He drives them out. He desecrates their temple, puts a statue up there, and he says, you are going to worship Satan now. Basically, you're worshiping the beast. That's the abomination of desolation. That will be the trigger point that will start the 3.5 years when he becomes the dictator. Okay. Now, how will he come in? It goes on in Daniel 8. Through his shrewdness or his cunning, he is going to cause deceit to succeed. Did y'all get that? Deceit and deception will succeed by his influence. He's going to magnify himself in his heart, and he is going to be able to destroy many that are at ease. They're going to be at ease. Remember when he came 3.5 years ago? He was the peacemaker. Everything was in chaos. Were people looking for a peacemaker? Who can take care of all this? And here he came on his white horse. Remember, this is the Antichrist because he always counterfeits. So he's on the white horse because Jesus is going to be on a white horse in chapter 19. So here he comes. He has a bow, but he has no arrows. He's coming as a peacemaker. He offers peace. He's going to make that covenant for 7 years. But what happens at 3.5 years? He breaks it and he turns on them because why? He's now indwelt and energized by Satan. And he's going to turn on them. Now, how is he coming? Paul in 2 Thessalonians says, here's 2 of your titles. That man of sin, the son of perdition. He's also called the lawless one. He is coming in accord with the activity of who? That's how he's going to rise. It will be through the activity of Satan. There's going to be all kinds of power. There will be signs and false and lying wonders. A huge time of deception, but we just read his deception will what? Succeed. Now, a strong delusion is going to be given. It says he's going to be given the power to do signs and wonders with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they didn't receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. So now people that have heard the truth, and we're at the halfway mark. People that had heard the truth, but they didn't receive it. Does it say that they're going to be sent a delusion and believe the lie? God will send them a deluding influence so that they might believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but they took pleasure in unrighteousness. Now, the abomination of desolation. When Jesus talked about it and first mentioned it, he's on the Mount of Olives with the 4 guys that he had the private conversation with, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And he's talking to them, and he says, the people who's in power, Rome, of the prince, that's the Antichrist, the people of the prince that shall come are going to destroy the city and the sanctuary. Have we learned that a lot of prophecies have a fulfillment right here, and then they have one way out in the future, usually in the tribulation period or the millennium? So it's been about 35 years since Jesus went to heaven. Now, what happened in 70 AD? Was this a partial fulfillment? Right, because you had the Romans come in with Titus, and did they destroy the temple and destroy the city of Jerusalem? Yes. Now, and I want you to listen to this, because this jumped out at me this week because of what I learned last week. The end thereof, this last 3.5 years, shall be with a what? Did we have that last week? Oh, some of you remember. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. We'll come back to the flood in a minute. The Antichrist breaks the covenant. He begins his massacre of these Jews, trying to wipe out the nation so the promises of God cannot be fulfilled regarding their salvation. Does he promise to save a remnant of the Jews? Yes. Does he promise them a kingdom? Yes. Okay. So the Antichrist is trying to prevent this. Remember last week when he got kicked out of heaven? And he's pursuing the Jews, right, on the earth. And the serpent, who is the devil, he cast out of his mouth his water as a what? Is that what we just read? Yes. So, water is a flood. He's going after the woman because he wants her to be carried away. Now, we talked about the flood is probably symbolic of like his massive military, just whatever he can find to go after them and destroy them. Now, what happens? Does God take care of them? Yeah, because the earth is going to open up, and it's going to swallow those people that are after the Jews, and will swallow them up. A great chasm will open in the earth. We studied last week, there were 2 other instances where that happened in the Old Testament, how God took care of them. Now, the dragon is very mad, because what has happened? Jesus, or God, what's he going to do with that remnant? He's going to take them somewhere safe for 3.5 years, right? And then all of my troops have been swallowed up in the ground. I am really mad, right? Okay. And so now he's going to make war with the remnant of her seed. So he's going after other believers, basically. Okay. So now it says he will make complete destruction until his own desolation comes at the hands of who? Christ. All right, let's look at that a little bit, because Daniel 8:24-25 has a prophecy for me. And so it says, he will be broken. We're talking about the Antichrist. He's going to be broken without human agency. What does that mean? No man will be able to deal with him or destroy him. For 3.5 years. No man can do that. Now, if we go back to Daniel 7, we see something else happening. And in Daniel 7, this is the crowning of Jesus Christ by God the Father that is in this vision. And Daniel says, I'm watching in the night visions, and with the clouds of the sky, one like a son of man was approaching. He went up to the Ancient of Days, which is God the Father, and he was escorted before him. So we have Jesus Christ. He's done his sacrifice, and he's being presented before God the Father. And what does it say? He's going to be given authority, glory, sovereign power over all peoples, nations, and men of every language are going to worship him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. That is the crowning. Daniel sees that in his vision, the crowning of Jesus Christ as Lord. And what's he going to be given at that time? A kingdom, power, glory, and dominion. Now I'm back in Daniel 7:8. See, we have to go all over the Bible to put all this together. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn was speaking. I beheld even till the beast was slain. This is a prophecy. His body is going to be destroyed. And it will be given to the burning flame. This is a prophecy. Has this happened yet? No, but I go to the Apostle Paul and he says, I agree. This is how it's going to happen. No human agency. He calls him the lawless one. And he says the lawless one who's going to slay? The Lord Jesus Christ is going to slay the Antichrist. How? With the breath of his mouth. Paul says, I agree with that prophecy with Daniel, and John wraps it all up, and he says, the beast is going to be captured, and he's going to be thrown alive into that lake of fire burning with sulfur. See, so we had a prophecy, Paul agrees, and then John, he puts it all together for us. It's like the cherry on top, right? Yeah, that's how it's going to happen. Now, in Daniel 11, we see a final battle. The king shall do according to his will. He's going to exalt himself. He's going to magnify himself above every god. He's going to speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and he shall prosper. And you're saying, how long? See, we have another answer to the question here if you didn't understand the time, times, and half a times. And now he says, till the indignation is accomplished. What's the indignation? The tribulation period. Till it's all over. For that is determined, it shall be done. Now, did Jesus affirm Daniel? Have you ever read people or heard people say that Daniel didn't really write it as prophecy before it happened? Have you ever said people say they discount Daniel? You haven't? Okay. Jesus affirms Daniel as a prophet in Matthew 24:15, because there are people that will say Daniel shouldn't have been in the canon. And they will say Daniel didn't write prophecy, he wrote history after it happened. But see, he wrote about Babylon and Greece. He wrote about all that before it ever happened. But you have commentators that say, nope, they don't have the right date. He really didn't do it till after it was all done. Well, Jesus affirmed the prophecy of Daniel and quoted him in Matthew 24, verse 15. Now, does Satan know his time is short? Oh my, yes. Okay. Satan knows his time is short because what has already happened that you and I have studied? Have the seals happened? Yes. And when the seventh seal was open, it revealed all those trumpets coming up. And remember, they had 30 minutes of silence. Got to catch my breath to see what's coming. Yeah. So then we had the 7 trumpets. And we've had all the grass burn up. We've had a third of the trees burned up. And then trumpet number 2, a third of the sea became blood, a third of the ships were destroyed, and a third of the marine life in the sea was destroyed. Trumpet number 3, a third of the waters have turned bitter and poisoning people because of wormwood. And then in trumpet 4, we had a third of the sun, the moon, and the stars, and they aren't giving all their light. And then I'm going to cover trumpet 5 and 6 here in just a minute. So Satan knows his time is short. So it's about ready to begin, right? The bowls of wrath are about to start. But we're in a parenthetical passage for a little bit with a lot of explanation. And so Satan knows the end will soon be coming. Now, in trumpet 5, which was woe number 1, remember we have 3 woes. They go with trumpet 5, 6, and 7. So, woe number 1, trumpet 5. God has opened up the pit, and he's allowed all those temporarily bound demons to come pouring out of the pit, and hell is unleashed on earth at trumpet number 5. Remember those demonic locusts, they were called, that came up, and their sting would last for 5 months, torment people. People want to die, and they can't, right? And it lasts 5 months. And who does it affect? The non-believers. It came upon the earth dwellers, the non-believers. And here's an artist's rendition of what those things might look like, and as the way that they're described in the Bible. Unleashed from the pit of hell, and their sting will last for 5 months. But what are the people on earth doing, the earth dwellers? Cursing God, and they will not repent. Now, trumpet number 6, which was woe number 2, they're going to call out to release the 4 angels that were bound at the Euphrates River, and 200 million demons are released from the Euphrates River. And we looked at them before. Remember, they're on horses, and the horse has the head of a lion, and fire and sulfur and all that comes out of their mouth, and they're allowed to kill 1/3 of mankind. And this is after the 5 months of the demonic locusts. So this is kind of where we have been. Demonism will be at a historical height. God has vacated the universe of the demons that occupy space between here and heaven, and they are all on earth. Can you even imagine? Satan really will be operating with the most massive force he's ever had. It goes on to say, Satan's final onslaught against God during these last 3.5 years, God's wrath, because you're getting ready to have the bowls, right? And they are worse than the seals and the trumpets. So we're getting ready for God's wrath to be poured out upon the earth. But who's mad as a hornet now on the earth? Satan, and his fury is also on the earth. And all of that's going on for 3.5 years. So we have the whole universe falling to pieces under the wrath of God, and all hell is breaking loose under the fury of Satan. I cannot even imagine the horrific time that will be. The Antichrist is Satan's chief weapon, because he will be the human, he will be a human, who basically sits on top of all the human operation in the world. Is he the dictator for 3.5 years? And he's responding. Satan is driving him. Satan is energizing him. Now, so Revelation 13, that we're about to start verse 1. Oh, mercy. Sorry. The end-time form of the old Roman Empire. Remember, because he came out of the beast that represented Rome. By this point in the tribulation, we've developed into this 10-nation confederation, and we've had a very subtle leader. Remember? He came in peace to begin with. One whom Satan is now going to use in the most hideous ways. So with the rise of this beast and the false prophet in Revelation 13, we're finally being introduced to the Trinity from hell. Both are the product of the mechanizations of that old serpent, the devil or Satan. So Satan is on earth, unleashing his massive effort. He wants to defeat God and set up his own kingdom, and his main man to use is the Antichrist. This passage in Revelation 13 takes us to the end of the 7 years as we go through it, and the final battle in which Satan will engage God in Christ as he attempts to get sovereign rule, and he wants worship equal to God. Is Satan the god of this world? Yes, we know that from 2 Corinthians 4. Does he have a counterfeit for everything? Yes. So as God sent his son into the world, Satan is actually going to send his Antichrist into the world. Was God in Christ? Yes. Satan will incarnate himself in the Antichrist. And many people will believe the lie, and they will be deceived in believing that he is the Messiah. Was God manifested in the flesh? Jesus Christ, right? And so in the Antichrist, we're actually going to have Satan manifested in the flesh with the mystery of iniquity. Terrible time, huh? So I'm at verse 1 of chapter 13. Okay. Verse 1. I stood upon the sand of the sea. I see a beast rise up out of the sea. Oh, and look at this beast. He has 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns he has 10 crowns, and upon his heads he has the name of blasphemy. Does he sound familiar? Do we remember that in the very beginning, Satan and a third of his angels were cast out of heaven during a rebellion before creation? Yes, we remember that. Then in chapter 12, which we've already talked about today, there was a war in heaven, and Satan and his demons were cast to earth, right? So we know where they are, and there's no longer any place for them in heaven. It says in verse 9, the great dragon, that old serpent, the devil Satan, he deceives the whole world, and he's cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And so we look at warfare on earth. Last week we looked at warfare on earth, then we went to heaven, and then back on earth, remember? Now, in his attempt to prevent God's fulfillment of his earthly kingdom, remember he wanted to annihilate the Jews. Is that who he first went after with the flood, remember? Okay, he goes after him with a flood. But God's going to take him, I believe, to Petra, there in modern-day Jordan, and he will protect a remnant of the Jews in their prepared place for the last 42 months or 3.5 years of the tribulation period. So Revelation 12, where we ended last week, the dragon, is he mad? Yes. He is mad because the Jews have been taken off to safety, and he is mad, and he is having trouble. All of his people have been swallowed up in the earth, right? That's what we just left. And so he goes off to make war with her children. Verse 1, we find him standing on the seashore, and the beast is rising out of the sea. Now, in the Greek text, the verse we just read went with chapter 12. Does that make sense? He's mad. All these things have happened. The Jews have been taken off and they're protected, and he's lost everything. The earth swallowed him up, and now he's standing there just looking out. Rising out of the sea, he sees this beast rising out of the sea. Now, this is a logical progression of cause and effect. It continues the story of the dragon, right? Do y'all see that? Okay. He's defined as Satan. Older manuscripts have it, he stood, still talking about the dragon. Do y'all see that? Because some people say it's John standing there. Now, John sees it because he's writing it in his vision. But I believe it's the dragon standing there looking that sees the beast right out of the sea. And that's what is indicated in the older manuscripts. Now, Isaiah likens the nations, which are Gentiles, heathens, to a roaring and restless sea that cannot be quiet, and whose waters can only churn up refuse and mud. Is that what's going to come out of these waters? Yeah. A fitting picture of the products of a world without peace with God. So the great red dragon, I think, symbolically, is standing over the nations of the world as if he possesses them. And John said, I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Now notice in context, do we have an angry dragon, Satan, that's looking out over the sea of nations? Now, John MacArthur says he believes that the dragon is standing there and summons forth the beast. And the beast rises up out of the sea. Now, he will then implement the system of the beast to carry out his desired goals. What has Satan wanted to do? Persecute Israel, and he wants to be worshiped. And he's tried this and he's tried this, right? He's angry. Now what am I going to do? Okay? Now, so we have the beast rising from the sea, which is the Antichrist. He's the second member of the unholy Trinity, and he's Satan's agent on earth. Everybody following? Okay. Now, if we look at the word beast, it is used 46 times in the New Testament. 35 of them are in the book of Revelation. And it's a beast. From the Greek, it means a wild and rapacious animal or beast. And if you look at it, it portrays the brutal, bloody, uncontrolled, and wild character of this dictator and his system. Is his system going to be inhuman? Yes, it will be. It portrays this Antichrist figure as the epitome and paramount outgrowth of a character, Satan, who's called the Great Red Dragon. Now, you have to understand this beast in a twofold way. Is he a person? Does he have a kingdom? Yes, he has a system. So he is a king and he has a kingdom, right? Okay. Now, he represents a kingdom, and this is kind of a picture of him. How many heads? 7. He has how many horns? But each horn has a crown on it. Remember the other one, Satan? The crowns were on the heads. Now the crowns are on the horns. And upon his heads, what does he have? The name of blasphemy. So he is a person. He's always described with personal pronouns. The Antichrist is this monster. He is a king, but he also has a kingdom. Now, think about Hitler. See the satanic final world empire, inseparable from the satanically empowered man who leads it. Could you separate Hitler from his kingdom? No. Same thing with the Antichrist. You think it's him and it's his system, so they go together. Now, this sea beast has 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns, whereas the dragon had 7 heads, 7 crowns, and 10 horns. A little bit of difference, right? Just a little bit. Now, what do horns represent? Power. Yeah, offensive power so you can go attack, defensive power so you can protect. But they also represent force, they represent strength. So they represent these nations, we're back to our 10 toes, that are going to come together as one, forming what is a revived Roman Empire. I want you to notice in this beast on the Antichrist, all the heads are on him. They aren't separate out here. Remember? Okay, this is a picture of the beast. This beast in Revelation 13:1, and you ought to mark this in your Bible so you don't have to keep looking it up. The beast in Revelation 13:1 is the little horn of Daniel's beast. So it's the Antichrist. Now, the stage of the empire depicted by the beast is the period after the emergence of the little horn. Remember, he rose up on Daniel's beast. He is the future world ruler, and he has displaced 3 of the horns, and he is becoming the dictator, right? Yes, thank you. So in Revelation 13:2, part A, the beast that I see, he's like a leopard, he's got feet like the feet of a bear, and his mouth is like the mouth of a lion. Does all that sound familiar? Yeah, it's very familiar. When Daniel had his, remember, his were in beast form. And the lion represents regal power, a bear represents ferociousness, and a leopard represents great speed. And oh, mercy. Sorry. Can you get it, Anna? I hope it's still working. Thank you. Wow, that's a first. Okay, wait a minute. Sorry. This time they are all embodied in one person. So everything about Greece, everything about Rome, everything about Babylon, and all, it's all in one thing now, in one beast. Now, the little horn, he emerged from the 4th beast, which was Rome, of Daniel's vision, and he's John's beast in Revelation 13. So what do I know? My little horn is Antichrist, and I can get that from Daniel and from John. So, upon his heads are the name of blasphemy. We see that. Now, and I've got a chart for you that compares the little horn of Daniel 7 with the beast of Revelation 13. I've given this to you before, so you can kind of look through that and see Daniel's little horn and the beast that John describes in chapter 13. They're the same. Now, here is an artist's rendition of this beast, and 3 ways that he will have upon his head the names of blasphemy. What is he going to do? He will declare he is God. Remember, in the temple, the abomination of desolation, he's going to try to usurp the place of God. And Paul says this lawlessness, he will slander the true God. So we have several different ways that blasphemy will be written all across him. Who gives him his power, his seat, his authority? Satan. That's in Revelation 13:2. Now, at the midpoint of the tribulation, when all this abomination of desolation, all of this is going on, the dictator, the little horn is rising. I have a Satan-empowered man. Satan-empowered. Now, his power, this is a Greek word dunamis, and it means it's often used the power to perform a miraculous wonder. Did Paul say in 2 Thessalonians he would be able to do all kinds of lying signs and wonders? Sure, and deceive. Now, Satan is going to be able to perform miraculous feats through this man, and it's part of all this great deception. His throne, Satan gives him his throne. His position as king or emperor, it's like a revived Roman Empire, because remember, the little horn came out of the beast that was Rome, ruling supremely over the rest of the nations. Remember, 7 kings, 5 fallen, 1 is yet to come, and it's the revived Roman Empire. But he will continue for how long? A short space, which we know from other scriptures that we've put together is 3.5 years. And so we have gone over the 5 that are fallen before. Now, the 6th kingdom head was in existence during John's time. So number 6 is Rome. Did it fully embrace the mystery Babylon religion? Yes, very pagan. Now, number 8 is the future. And if you've been listening, when does number 8 start? At the halfway point. Remember? Because we had number 7 is the 10 kings or 10 toes. When I have a dictator, it's actually number 8. He will be energized by Satan because Satan's been cast out of heaven to earth. I know I keep repeating, but I'm really hoping it's become clear, the procedure here. He will have great authority. The extension of his rule goes beyond now the 10-nation confederation. It says in verse 7, he will have power and authority over kindreds and tongues and nations. So the Antichrist is to be a king, and he's going to rule over a kingdom, which is actually the whole world except for modern-day Jordan. Remember, there's 3 that he's not going to be allowed to have control over, and that's where Petra is. And we went over that last week. He will accept the kingdoms of this world that Satan offered Christ. Remember that? And Jesus refused, didn't he? But the Antichrist will accept it. Now, during the tribulation, he is the unseen ruler of this world. Satan will have complete rule through the man of lawlessness, the beast, for a short time. Now, where's the restrainer of evil? Where is he? Where is he during this time? He has stepped back. Remember, where's the church? We're in heaven. The Holy Spirit, will he still be working in people? Yes. But what does he do right now? He's restraining evil. So when evil runs rampant, the Holy Spirit, the restrainer, has pulled back. And there will be no restraining of evil. And you and I cannot even begin to imagine what it would be like when evil is not restrained. So, the demons of the universe have been released out of the pit in trumpet 5 and 6. They have been freed from their bindings at the Euphrates River, and all of them are on earth. God will restrain nothing during these last 3.5 years. The first group that came out of the pit, they could harm the unbelievers for 5 months. The second group that comes out of the Euphrates River can kill them with fire and brimstone. At the same time, all this is happening, God's wreaking havoc because all of the 7 bowls are getting ready to be released. And they will be the worst. He's pouring out the fury of a collapsing universe on the heads of those that are in the world. This Holocaust will be unimaginable. John saw this beast rise out of the sea. Now, when the chaos gets so bad and there's no answers and no solution, we have a perfect time for somebody to rise up as a leader, right? And that's what's going to happen. Leaders are usually born in a crisis. Leaders rise in the midst of, we have all these problems nobody can solve. Leaders come to the top when we don't have any solutions for what's going on. It is in this frightening and horrible chaos of the world that this man is going to be able to rise. He gets his power from Satan, and he will seize authority in the midst of an emergency. You think about all the seals and the trumpets that have gone on. About half of the population has died. You've got animals dying. You have the grass burned up. You just go back and review the seals and the trumpets. So successful will be his rise that men will be thrilled by his masterly genius and accept the principle that, we can only have an imperial form of government now that will give the world lasting peace. They'll throw aside their freedom to have peace. This man will come on the scene at the beginning of the tribulation, and he's going to bring peace, right? That tells us that before his rise, at the beginning of the tribulation period, there's going to be utter worldwide chaos. Maybe because of the rapture. Don't you think that'll throw the world into some chaos? When the church is taken out of the world, it will most likely be a time of great chaos. Think about Germany in the mid-1930s. Hitler just didn't pop up out of nowhere. He didn't come from the top down. He came from the bottom up. Why? People in Germany were in economic despair. They were in spiritual despair. There was political chaos. They had economic depression. Small businesses were collapsing all over Germany, one by one in every city. Sounds a little familiar. Millions of people were out of work. It was a desperate time, and people were looking for somebody to lead them out. Hitler knew the mood of the people, and he knew the strategy of the moment. Adolf Hitler started out as a lowly corporal. I didn't realize that. He worked his way up the Reichstag until he was at last in charge of everything. He emerged from absolute and utter obscurity to become the central figure in the world, and himself demon-possessed. They said later he even spoke with a voice that was not his own. From that position of power which he gained because of the chaos, he plunged the whole of Europe into his bloody reign of terror, which was a preview of what it will be like on a worldwide scale when the Antichrist comes. One greater than Hitler is going to rise out of the chaos that will prevail in the world. He will be a man of marvelous appearance, transcendent ability, and indescribable magnetism. The problem is, he's going to be possessed, indwelt, and moved by a demon that comes out of the abyss. He will have great authority, and the world will give the authority for all of it into his hands. He is Satan's supreme human instrument. He's going to come to destroy Israel and to prevent her salvation and her kingdom and to kill believers. He's coming to conquer the world and to defeat Christ so that Satan can get what he wants, to rule as God. Let's pray. Father, I just pray that the lesson that we've had today, we will realize the seriousness that is going to be coming in that 7-year period. And Lord, that it will motivate us to evangelism, to share with others. All of us have friends and family who are not believers. And oh God, may, if they even believe that this Bible is the Word of God, if they could see what is coming upon the earth. I pray, Lord, that we somehow can get this message to them, that they would listen and have a receptive heart, and that they would put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ, who is the only way, that they would repent and they would make Jesus the Lord of their life. We'll give you all the praise in Christ's name. Amen. Well, we had a little sound effects over here. But we just we keep on. So next week, we'll continue with the Antichrist, and I don't know, we may get to the false prophet. Time will tell. So I hope all of you will join me again next week. Thanks for coming.